She was talking to no one. Standing in the elevator of a 42-story building rehearsing answers to an interview she had not yet walked into. Her voice was steady. Her hands were not. She held them behind her back, pressing her fingernails into her palms, the way she always did before something that mattered. The man standing 3 feet to her left had stepped on at the 38th floor. He had not pressed a button. The interview she was preparing for was 11 minutes away behind a door with his name on it. She did not know that. The elevator was old. The building was mid-renovation, and the lift moved the way old machinery moves when it knows it is being replaced. Slowly, with the sound of cables adjusting overhead, the kind of elevator where two strangers standing 3 feet apart have nowhere to look and nothing to do but exist in the same air for longer than either of them planned. She did not notice him. Or rather, she noticed him the way you notice anyone in a confined space. A peripheral shape, a presence to be polite around. She adjusted her posture slightly when the doors closed, straightened. Her spine shifted her weight to her left foot. Then she started again. She was answering a question nobody had asked her. Not yet. Her voice was low but clear, the kind of voice that had practiced being heard in rooms that did not want to listen. She was rehearsing the answer to a question about time management. She said she had learned to organize her hours the way other people organize money. That when you are the only adult in a household, every minute has a job, and the minutes that do not have jobs do not exist. She said it simply, without performance, without the corporate phrasing that interviewers expect and immediately forget. Julian Whitfield was standing with his phone in his right hand. His thumb had been moving toward the screen when she started speaking. It stopped. He did not unlock the phone. He did not put it away either. He just held it screen dark while the elevator climbed past the 14th floor. He had planned to get off at 30, the executive conference suite, a quarterly review meeting he had already read the deck for. His hand moved toward the panel. It did not reach the button. The blazer she was wearing did not fit her correctly. The shoulders sat slightly too wide, the way a garment sits when it was made for someone else's frame. But the blazer was clean pressed with visible care. The cuffs at the wrist had been re-hemmed by hand, not expertly but precisely. Someone had taken a needle and thread to those cuffs and made them work. Her shoes were older than the blazer, black polished to the kind of shine that requires effort, not expense. The sole on the left one was thinner than the right by a 1/4 inch. She had been walking unevenly for a long time. She held her handbag with both hands in front of her. Not loosely, the way you hold something when you need your hands to be doing something so the rest of you can keep functioning. The elevator passed the 22nd floor. She moved to the next question. The voice shifted slightly, not louder, steadier. The kind of steadiness that arrives when someone has said a thing enough times to stop being afraid of it. "What is your greatest weakness?" She paused for half a breath before answering. "My greatest weakness is time," she said. "Not managing it, having enough of it. I have 2 children. One is 7, one is 4. I do not have a co-parent. I do not have family in the city. Every hour I spend at work is an hour someone else is being paid to watch my kids, and that cost comes out of the same paycheck the work is supposed to provide. So I have learned to be worth more per hour than most people are willing to be. Not because I am better, because I do not have the option of being slower." The elevator passed 28. Julian did not move. He was not looking at her. He was looking at the floor indicator above the door, but he was not reading the numbers. He was listening to a woman describe the mathematics of a life he had studied from the outside and never once calculated from the inside. She was not performing. That was the thing. The words she was saying did not sound like answers. They sounded like facts. The way someone states their height or their age. Information that does not require decoration because it is simply true. The elevator reached 30. The doors opened. Julian did not step out. The doors closed. She did not notice. She had moved on to the next question. She was telling the empty air in front of her why she wanted this job. She did not say growth or opportunity or alignment with company values. She said stability. She said the word like it had a weight she had been carrying for a long time and had finally found the right place to set it down. The elevator climbed past 34, past 36, toward 38. She stopped speaking. She straightened her blazer with both hands. She adjusted the strap of her handbag. She took one breath, then another. The doors opened on 38. She stepped out without looking back. Julian stepped out 2 seconds after her. She turned left toward the reception desk. He turned right toward his office. She did not see him go. She did not know yet that the hallway she was walking down and the office he was walking toward were connected by the same door. Simone Ellison woke up at 5:47 that morning. Not because the alarm went off, because Amara had climbed into bed at some point during the night and was lying sideways across the pillow with one foot pressed against Simone's neck. She moved the foot gently. She lay still for a moment, not sleeping, calculating. Childcare today was $85. She had $62 in checking and a $20 taped to the inside of her phone case for the kind of emergency that was not quite an emergency, but could not wait. She had put it there 3 weeks ago. She told herself she would not use it today. She had told herself that 4 times before. She got up. The apartment was a 1-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a building in Dorchester, where the hallway lights had been out for 6 weeks, and the landlord responded to maintenance requests the way most people respond to spam mail. She had been there 11 months. Before that, a studio in Roxbury. Before that, a room she rented from a woman in Quincy who changed the lock one Tuesday while Simone was at work because she was 3 days late on the month's payment. Elijah was already awake. He was sitting on the floor next to Amara's pull-out mat, putting her shoes on for her. Not because Simone had asked, because he had learned that mornings worked better when he helped, before the helping was needed. He was 7. He tied shoelaces the way a person ties shoelaces when they have been doing it for someone else longer than they have been doing it for themselves. Simone ironed the blazer on a towel spread across the kitchen counter. The blazer belonged to her neighbor, Yvonne, who worked nights at a care facility and slept during the day. Yvonne had left it hanging on Simone's door handle at 6 o'clock the previous evening with a sticky note that said, "Bring it back in one piece and get that job." The iron was small and old. It took 7 minutes to heat up properly. She had timed it. She had timed everything. The shoes were from Renee, a woman she had worked with 2 years ago at a temp agency that placed administrative assistants in offices that needed someone for less than a month. Renee wore the same size. She had offered them without being asked, which meant she had noticed Simone looking at them, which meant Simone had not hidden it well enough. The pants were hers. One pair of black dress pants with no visible wear. She kept them in a garment bag inside her closet. She wore them only for interviews. They had been to 47 interviews in 3 years. She did not check her bank balance. She had stopped checking on mornings that mattered. She packed Elijah's lunch, a peanut butter sandwich cut diagonally, because that was how he liked it, and because some things did not need to be efficient. She poured cereal for both of them. She stood at the bathroom mirror while they ate and practiced answering questions she already knew the answers to. In her hand, she held a black composition notebook with a cracked spine and pages that had started to yellow at the edges. She did not open it. She held it the way some people hold a photograph before they leave the house not to look at to carry. Simone married Jerome Vance when she was 22. She had known him since high school. He was the kind of man who made plans out loud and believed them while he was saying them. The plans changed. The volume did not. Elijah was born when she was 23. Jerome was present for the delivery and absent for most of what came after. Not dramatically, not violently. He simply became less there in increments so small that by the time she noticed the absence, it had already become the norm. He left the apartment when Amara was 6 months old. He took his clothes, his PlayStation, and the car seat from the back seat of a car he had already returned to the dealership without telling her. He did not leave a note. He did not file for custody. He did not pay child support. Not because a court told him he did not have to, because he simply did not. And no one with the authority to compel him had been compelled to try. Simone enrolled in community college 4 months after he left business administration. The program was 2 years. She completed it in 2.5 while working 2 jobs and raising 2 children under 3. She attended classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. On the days she could not find childcare, Elijah came with her. He sat on her lap during introduction to accounting and drew circles on the back of her notebook while the professor explained amortization schedules. Nobody told her to leave. Nobody offered to help either. Her academic advisor was a woman named Margaret Denton, who wore reading glasses on a beaded chain and spoke in the tone of someone who had been in her position long enough to confuse caution with wisdom. During their second meeting, she reviewed Simone's schedule and her transcript, and the fact that she was 24 years old with 2 children and no partner, and working 30 hours a week on top of a full-time course load. She looked at Simone over the top of her glasses. "Have you considered a more realistic path?" Simone did not answer. The advisor had framed it as a question. It was not a question. It was a conclusion dressed up in the shape of one. Simone finished the semester. She wrote her final exam for business strategy with one hand. The other hand held a sleeping infant across her chest in a fabric carrier that she had bought for $4 at a yard sale in Hyde Park. Amara was 9 months old. She had fallen asleep 11 minutes into the exam and did not wake up until Simone handed in the paper and walked out of the building into the rain. She passed not by a small margin, by enough to make the dean's list for the only semester she was eligible. She did not attend the ceremony. She could not afford the cap and gown rental. The academic advisor called it unrealistic. Simone called it Tuesday. Then Amara got sick. Not a cold. Not something that went away with rest and fluids and a week of missed daycare. A kidney condition that required hospitalization monitoring and 2 surgical procedures spaced 5 months apart. Simone slept in a reclining chair next to Amara's bed for the first 3 weeks. Then on a folding cot the nurses brought her when they realized she was not leaving. Then back in the chair when another child needed the cot. 14 months. She did not work for 14 months. She applied for every assistance program the hospital social worker gave her. She sold the furniture she could not store. She moved out of the apartment because she could not pay rent from a hospital room. When Amara was discharged, they moved into a shelter in the South End for 6 weeks, then into the studio in Roxbury, then into the room in Quincy. Her resume carried a 14-month gap that sat between her degree and her work history like a crack in a windshield. Every interviewer saw it. Most asked about it. She did not explain it. Not because she was ashamed. Because she had learned that the moment you say the words, "My daughter was in the hospital," the interview stops being an interview. It becomes a sympathy exercise, and sympathy had never once turned into a job offer. So the gap stayed empty on the page, and the 47 interviews that followed it stayed in the notebook she carried with her every time she walked into a room where someone had the power to change her life and almost never did. The notebook was a standard black and white composition book, the kind sold in packs of 3 at any drugstore for less than $5. She had bought this one 4 years ago, the week after her 23rd interview ended with a handshake and a sentence that began with, "We'll be in touch." They were not in touch. She started the notebook that night, not out of hope, out of discipline. Every interview she attended after that was recorded in the notebook the same evening. The date, the company, the position, the name of the interviewer, if she remembered it, the questions they asked, the answers she gave, and beside each answer a small mark, a check if the answer worked, a dash if it did not, and next to the ones that did not work. The revised version. The version she practiced until it replaced the original in her memory. She did not call them rejections, she called them data. 47 data points in 3 years. The notebook was organized the way an engineer organizes a system log, not with emotion, with sequence. Each entry followed the same format. Each revision was dated. The pages that worked well were dog-eared at the top corner. The ones that needed more work were dog-eared at the bottom. Over time, the top corners outnumbered the bottom ones, not by much, but enough to track. The cover was soft from being opened and closed in bus seats and waiting rooms and bathroom mirrors and kitchen tables after the children fell asleep. The spine had cracked in 2 places and been reglued with clear tape that had turned yellow with age. It smelled faintly of the inside of her handbag of hand lotion and loose change, and the peppermints she kept for Elijah when he got restless on long bus rides. But the notebook was not only data. At the back, past the last interview entry, past the revisions and the marks and the dog-eared corners, there were 3 pages in handwriting that was not Simone's. The handwriting was smaller, neater, written with a ballpoint pen that pressed hard enough to leave grooves on the page behind it. It belonged to Corinne Ellison Simone's mother. Corinne cleaned hotel rooms for 31 years at the Wexford Grand on Copley Square. She started at 19, she worked 6 days a week. She never called in sick, not once in 31 years of employment. Not when her back gave out at 40. Not when Simone's father left when Simone was 3. Not when the hotel changed ownership twice and reduced her hours both times, and she picked up weekend shifts at a second property to cover the difference. She cleaned rooms the way she did everything without complaint, without witnesses, without expecting that anyone who slept in the bed she made would ever wonder who made them. She died 2 years before the morning Simone stood in the bathroom mirror practicing interview answers with a composition notebook in her hand, a stroke at work in room 412 of the Wexford Grand, between a checkout at 11 o'clock and a check-in at 3 o'clock. She was 53. The pages Corinne left in the back of the notebook were not a letter. They were a list written in the weeks after Corinne was diagnosed with high blood pressure and told by a doctor she could not afford to see regularly that she needed to slow down. She did not slow down, but she wrote the list 3 items. She titled it in capital letters at the top of the first page, "Things They Cannot Take From You." The first item was your name. The second was how hard you work when nobody is watching. The third was how you walk into a room. Corinne did not explain the list. She did not write a paragraph under each item. She did not frame them as advice or lessons or wisdom. She just wrote them. 3 lines in handwriting that pressed hard into the page as though she wanted to make sure the words would survive the paper. I want to pause here for a moment because this is the part most stories leave out. We are trained to watch the person who signs the check and almost never the person who makes the bed. If you ask me, that is the real test of a life. Not how you treat the people who can lift you, but whether you can still see the ones the world has quietly taught you to walk past. Corinne was walked past for 31 years. What she left behind was not money. It was a way of standing in a doorway. Simone did not find the list until after the funeral. She had taken the notebook out of her mother's bedside drawer along with a Bible and a paste of reading glasses and a paste up from the Wexford Grand dated 4 days before Corinne died. The list was folded into the back cover of the notebook. She read it once. Then she placed it in the back of her own composition notebook, behind the 47 interview entries, behind the data, behind the revisions. She did not read it before interviews. She did not need to. She knew what it said. She carried it the way you carry the voice of someone who is no longer there, but whose instructions your body still follows without being told. How you walk into a room. Simone had walked into 47 rooms in 3 years. She had not gotten the job in any of them, but she had walked into every single one the same way. The way her mother walked into room 412 of the Wexford Grand on a Tuesday morning and did not walk out. If there is one thing to carry out of her story so far, let it be the smallest thing she does. She irons a borrowed blazer on a towel at 5 in the morning for a 48th room that has never once let her in. That is not desperation. It is a woman deciding that the next room will not get a smaller version of her just because the last 47 did not earn her best. You can borrow a blazer. You cannot borrow that. Julian Whitfield built Whitfield and Barrett Consulting over 11 years. The company did one thing. It told other companies how to hire, not who to hire how. The distinction mattered to Julian the way grammar matters to a man who learned English as a second language. Precision was not a preference. It was the infrastructure everything else was built on. The firm consulted for Fortune 500 companies on workforce optimization, talent pipeline efficiency, attrition modeling, behavioral fit indicators. The language was clinical because the work was clinical. You fed data into a system. The system produced assessments. The assessments produced decisions. The decisions produced outcomes that could be measured in quarterly reports and presented on slides with clean fonts and confident arrows pointing upward. Julian had spent 15 years watching hiring panels choose the wrong people for the right reasons. He knew exactly what separated a good employee from a good interviewer. They were almost never the same person. A good interviewer understood rhythm pauses, eye contact, calibrated to convey sincerity without crossing into intensity, the architecture of a sentence designed to answer the question they were asked while subtly answering the question they wanted to be asked. A good employee understood something else entirely, but the systems Julian built did not measure that something else. They measured presentation fluency, the ability to perform competence in a 45-minute window under fluorescent lighting with a glass of water you were not supposed to drink until offered. He knew this. He had known it for years. He had written papers about it. He had given keynote addresses at HR conferences where he explained the gap between interview performance and job performance using data sets that made the room nod in unison and changed nothing when they returned to their offices on Monday. This is not coldness. It is clarity. There is a difference. Julian ran his company the way he ran every room he walked into, with the assumption that if you could not quantify it, you could not trust it. And if you could not trust it, you could not build on it. He was not wrong about that. He was not entirely right either. But he had never been in a position where the difference between those two things mattered enough to stop him. 3 months after Julian started the firm, Whitfield and Barrett signed its first major contract, a workforce optimization engagement with a logistics company that employed 11,000 people across 9 states. Julian built the assessment framework himself. It evaluated candidates on 14 behavioral indicators across 3 performance domains. It was efficient, it was scalable, and it was built to screen out in the very first round one particular kind of person. The kind who cleaned buildings between 10 at night and 6 in the morning. The kind who was never interviewed for anything, only assigned dispatched, placed a name on a Sunday night call sheet. The kind who showed up and cleaned and left and was never late and never absent and never once given the chance to be anything other than temporary. Julian did not need a data set to picture that person. He could have drawn the face from memory. He never told anyone whose face it was. He kept one object from that life, and he did not keep it at home. He kept it in the shallow drawer built into the underside of the conference table on the executive side of the interview room, the drawer no one else had a reason to open. He did not take it out. He did not talk about it. Whatever was in that drawer was the single thing in Julian's life he had never learned to quantify, and a man who cannot quantify a thing learns to keep it in the dark. So that is where he kept it. And he ran the system. And the system worked, and working in the language his career had taught him to speak meant producing outcomes that could be measured. There are outcomes that cannot be measured, only witnessed. Julian knew that better than anyone in the building. He had simply decided a long time ago that no one was watching closely enough for the difference to matter. He was about to learn he was wrong, and he was about to learn it in a slow elevator from a woman who did not know his name. The elevator had not yet reached the 38th floor. Julian was standing against the back wall with his phone dark in his hand and the sound of a woman's voice filling the small space between them. She had moved past the question about time management. She had moved past the one about weakness. She was answering the last question on her list, the one she had saved. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? She did not answer it the way the system would have wanted her to. She did not talk about growth trajectories or leadership pipelines or alignment with organizational vision. She talked about a word: stability. She said it the way someone says the name of a place they had been trying to reach for a long time and can finally see from a distance. She said she wanted to be in one place long enough for her daughter to stop drawing maps of apartments they no longer lived in. She said she wanted to be in one place long enough for her son to stop packing his backpack the night before school, not because he was organized, because he had learned that if you keep your things in the bag, it is easier to leave when the leaving comes. She said she wanted to be in one place long enough for her children to understand that the floor beneath them was not going to move. She said the word again, stability. And the way she said it made it sound less like a career goal and more like a promise she had been making to two people who were too young to know they were the reason she was standing in an elevator on a Tuesday morning, rehearsing answers to questions that no one had asked her yet. Julian's hand had been near the panel since the 28th floor. He had planned to get off at 30. The executive conference room, a quarterly review meeting with two clients whose contracts were already secured and whose outcomes were already projected through the following fiscal year. His hand moved away from the panel. He did not press 30. He did not check his phone. He listened. The elevator passed 3234. He did not know her name yet. He did not know where she lived, or how many jobs she had worked, or how many interviews she had sat through, or what was written in the notebook she carried in her bag. He did not know yet that her mother had died in a hotel room on Copley Square 2 years ago, with a list folded into the back of a composition book. He did not know that the list contained 3 items, and that the third item was about how you walk into a room. He did not know any of that yet. He just knew that the woman standing 3 feet from him was not performing, and in 15 years of building systems designed to evaluate people, he had almost never heard someone in a professional context say something that was not a performance. The elevator reached 38. The doors opened. She straightened her blazer. She stepped out. He waited 2 seconds. Then he stepped out after her. He turned right. She turned left. She did not know yet that both directions led to the same room. The interview room was on the 38th floor. Corner office converted for the purpose. Glass table, 4 chairs, 3 on one side, 1 on the other. The one on the other side was slightly lower than the other 3, not intentionally, but not corrected either. The view behind the panel faced west. The financial district, the Zakim Bridge, the water beyond it catching the morning light in a way that made the room feel like it belonged to the city. The chair on Simone's side faced the panel, and the panel's view, and the distance between where she sat and everything visible through that glass. Vivian Calloway was already seated when Simone entered. Vivian was the director of human resources at Whitfield and Barrett. She had held the role for 6 years. She was precise. She was efficient. She conducted interviews the way a surgeon conducts a procedure, with a checklist, a timeline, and the professional courtesy of not wasting anyone's time, including her own. Her handshake was firm. Her eye contact was direct. Her pen was already uncapped when Simone sat down. Warren Coleman sat to her right, Senior Vice President of Client Operations. He had been with the company for 9 years. He smiled when Simone entered. Not a performance smile. The kind of smile a man gives when he has been in enough rooms to know that the person sitting across from him is nervous, and he remembers what that felt like. He shook her hand with both of his. The third chair was empty. A folio sat closed in front of it. A pen placed diagonally across the cover. A glass of water poured and untouched. Mr. Whitfield sends his apologies. Vivian said he will be joining us shortly. Simone nodded. She placed her bag beside her chair, not on the table, not on the empty seat. On the floor, tucked against the chair leg where it would not be seen unless someone looked for it. The notebook was inside the bag. She did not take it out. She sat upright. She placed her hands flat on her thighs beneath the table where no one could see whether they were shaking. They were not. She had done this 47 times. Her hands had learned. She looked at Vivian and shook her hand and held her gaze for exactly the right amount of time. Not too long, not too brief. The calibration of someone who has studied the mechanics of first impressions the way a musician studies scales. Not because it came naturally, because she had practiced until the practice became invisible. Vivian opened the folio. Warren uncapped his pen. The empty chair stayed empty. Simone did not look at it. She did not need to. She could feel its presence the way you feel an open door in a room where all the others are closed. Something was going to come through it. She just did not know what. Vivian asked the first question. "Tell us about a time you managed a project with limited resources." Simone paused. Not long. 2 seconds. The kind of pause that looks like hesitation but is not. It is measurement. The way a carpenter holds the board against a line before cutting. She was choosing where to begin. She began with the temp assignment at a logistics company in Everett, where she had been placed as an administrative assistant for 3 weeks and ended up reorganizing the shipping intake process because nobody else had, and the backlog was costing the warehouse 11 hours of overtime per week. She explained what she did. She explained why. She explained the outcome. Vivian wrote something down. Warren nodded. The answer was structured, not rehearsed. Structured the way a person structures their thinking when they have done enough of something to know the shape of it before they start speaking. She did not use the word "I" more than necessary. She did not lean forward or gesture with her hands, or fill the silence after she finished with a qualifier. She said what she had to say, then she stopped. Vivian asked a second question. "How do you handle conflicting priorities?" Simone answered a situation at the staffing agency where 2 supervisors gave her overlapping deadlines, and she completed both by reordering the steps in a way neither supervisor had considered because neither of them had been doing the task themselves. She described the reordering specifically, which steps she moved, what time she saved, how the solution became the default process after she left. She did not say she was proud of it. She said it worked. Warren asked a question about teamwork. She answered with a story about training a new hire at a retail position while covering a double shift because the evening supervisor had quit without notice. She trained the new hire during her first shift. She covered the floor during her second. She did both at the same time because there was no one else, and the store did not close for staffing problems. She did not describe this as going above and beyond. She described it as the shift. Vivian's pen had been moving steadily. Small marks in the margin of the printed resume check marks next to the questions, short notes in a handwriting so controlled it looked like type. Then her pen stopped at a point near the middle of the page. She did not look up. She did not ask a question. She drew a small horizontal line beside a section of the resume and underlined something twice the 14-month gap. It sat between the degree completion and the first stable work entry, like a blank window in a building where every other window had a light on. Vivian did not mention it, not yet, but her pen had marked it, and marking it meant it was now an item. It would come up. It always came up. Simone saw the pen move. She knew exactly where it had stopped. She had watched that pen stop at that same spot in 9 of her last 12 interviews. Different pens, different hands, same pause, same place on the page. She did not explain. She did not volunteer the context. She did not say the words "my daughter" or "hospital" or 14 months. She had learned what those words did to an interview. They turned it into something else, something that ended with sympathy and a handshake and a sentence that started with, "We really appreciate you coming in." She kept her hands on her thighs. She kept her eyes on Vivian. She waited for the next question. Vivian opened her mouth to ask it. Then the door opened. Julian closed the door behind him without apology. He did not explain his lateness. He sat in the empty chair and placed his hands flat on the table. Vivian shifted the folio toward him. Warren passed a copy of the resume. Julian did not look at it. He looked at Simone. Simone looked at Julian. She did not recognize him immediately. In the elevator, he had been wearing a gray pullover and dark jeans. No tie, no jacket. He had been holding a gym bag in one hand and his phone in the other. He had looked like someone who worked in the building, not someone who owned the name on the door. Now he was wearing a navy suit. The collar of his shirt was white and pressed. His watch caught the light from the window as he placed his hands on the table. She did not recognize the clothes. She recognized the eyes. The same eyes that had been standing 3 feet from her in a slow elevator while she rehearsed answers to questions she thought no one was listening to. The same eyes that had not looked at his phone. The same eyes that had not pressed the button for 30. She knew. She did not know how she knew so quickly. The face had changed context, the posture had changed, the entire frame around the person had changed, but the eyes had not moved differently. They watched her now the way they had watched her then, with the kind of attention that does not announce itself. She felt the recognition arrive the way you feel a change in air pressure before a storm, not through sight, through something older than sight. She understood in that moment that every word she had spoken in that elevator, every answer she had rehearsed out loud, every private sentence she had said to the empty air in front of her had not been said to empty air. It had been said to the man who was now sitting at the head of the table with her resume in front of him, and the authority to decide whether the last 3 years of preparation amounted to anything at all. She thought she had lost. She thought the interview was already over. She thought the woman who had stood in an elevator talking to herself about time management and weakness and stability had already been assessed and categorized and filed into whatever box a CEO puts people in when he catches them being unguarded in a confined space. She did not excuse herself. She did not drop her eyes. She did not apologize for anything she had said in the elevator because none of it had been a lie. She sat in the borrowed blazer with the rehemmed cuffs and the polished shoes with the uneven soles, and she held his gaze the way her mother had taught her to hold a room. Not with defiance, not with submission, with presence. The third item on the list, how you walk into a room. Simone had already walked into this one. Now she was staying in it. Julian did not follow the question sheet. He did not open the folio Vivian had placed in front of him. He did not review the resume. He sat for a moment, then he spoke. You said something in the elevator about stability. I would like to hear what that word means to you, specifically. The room went quiet. Vivian looked at Julian. This was not on the list. This was not part of the structured interview protocol she had designed for this role. Warren stopped writing. His pen rested on the pad. He looked at Simone the way you look at someone when you realize the conversation has changed and you do not yet know into what. Simone did not move. She heard the question. She heard the word elevator. She understood now that he was not pretending it had not happened. He was not ignoring it. He was asking her to repeat it to his face. In a room with 2 other people and a glass table and a view of the Zakim Bridge on the record. She took a breath. She started short. Stability means not moving. She stopped. Then she started again, longer this time. It means my son does not ask me every Sunday night whether we are going to live in the same place next week. It means my daughter can draw a picture of our apartment at daycare, and it is still accurate when I pick her up. It means I can tell my children what is happening on Thursday, because I know what is happening on Thursday. Vivian's pen was still. Julian was still. Warren was still. Simone kept going. She talked about the 14 months. She said the words she had never said in any of the 47 interviews before this one. My daughter was sick, a kidney condition, 2 surgeries. I slept in a hospital chair for 14 months because there was nowhere else to sleep, and I was not going to leave her in that room alone. She did not look away when she said it. She did not soften her voice. She stated it the way she stated her height or her name, a fact that did not require decoration. I did not work for 14 months because I was in a hospital with my child. That is the gap on my resume. I do not explain it in interviews because every time I have explained it, the interview turned into something else, something that ended with kindness and no callback. She paused. She looked at Julian. Stability is not a career goal, she said. It is not a 5-year plan. It is a 7-year-old boy who stopped unpacking his backpack because he learned it was easier to leave when your things were already in the bag. She stopped. The sentence sat in the room like a stone someone had placed on a table and walked away from. Vivian looked at the resume. at the gap, at the two thin underlines she had drawn beside it 4 minutes ago. She did not add a note. Warren put his pen down entirely. Julian looked at Simone Ellison, the woman who had been talking to no one in an elevator 40 minutes ago. She had not been talking to no one. She had been talking to the version of herself that still believed the 48th room might be different from the first 47. She was still talking to that version. She had never stopped. Whitfield and Barrett Consulting published a workforce analytics report every year. The report was distributed to clients cited in trade publications and used as a benchmark across the consulting industry. Julian had overseen every edition for 11 years. The data was precise, the methodology was rigorous, the conclusions were actionable. In the most recent edition, the report included a section on hiring bias and candidate attrition modeling. The section contained a finding that was not new. It had appeared in similar form in 6 of the last 8 editions. Candidates with resume gaps exceeding 12 months were 35% more likely to be screened out before the first interview, not rejected after the interview screened out before it. The gap itself functioned as a filter, not because hiring managers were instructed to eliminate candidates with gaps, because the system was built to prioritize continuity, and continuity in the language of workforce analytics meant an unbroken sequence of employment that followed a predictable pattern. The report did not call this bias. It called it a stability indicator. The system measured 3 of them: employment continuity, residential consistency, credential linearity. A candidate who had moved 3 times in 4 years, held more than 2 positions in the same period, and completed a degree outside the standard timeline was flagged as a moderate to high attrition risk. The algorithm did not know why the candidate had moved. It did not know that the moves were from a shelter to a studio to a room with a landlord who changed the locks on a Tuesday. It did not know that the 3 positions were not instability, but necessity, that each one was held simultaneously, not sequentially. It did not know that the degree was completed with an infant asleep on the candidate's chest during a final exam. The algorithm identified Simone Ellison as a moderate to high attrition risk based on 3 stability indicators. The algorithm did not have a field for sleeping in a hospital chair for 14 months. Julian knew this. He had known it for years. He had presented the data at conferences. He had written about the gap between what hiring systems measured and what they missed. He had published the finding year after year in the same report with the same recommendation that companies should develop supplemental assessment protocols to account for nonlinear career paths. The recommendation appeared on page 47 of the most recent edition. It had appeared on page 47 of the edition before that. No client had ever implemented it. Julian had never required them to. The system was not biased. It was precise, and precision without context is just a faster way to be wrong. The data showed that single mothers faced callback rates 35% lower than demographically comparable candidates without children. The data showed that the phrase cultural fit used in 71% of post-interview evaluations correlated with the rejection of candidates whose personal circumstances did not match the interviewer's assumptions about what a stable employee looked like. The data showed that the most reliable predictor of long-term employee retention was not credential linearity or residential consistency. It was what the report called persistence under resource constraint, the ability to maintain output when the inputs were reduced. The data had been in Julian's report for 3 years. Page 51. He had read it. He had approved it for publication. He had never once applied it to his own hiring process. He had built a system that could identify exactly the kind of person who would be eliminated by the system he had built. And he had let the system run not out of cruelty, out of efficiency. The two are not the same thing, but the distance between them is smaller than most people in his position would like to admit. Simone left the room at 11:14. She shook hands with Vivian and Warren. She nodded once at Julian. She picked up her bag from beside the chair leg. She walked out the way she had walked in steady, unhurried. She did not look back at the empty glass of water she had never been offered. She did not look at the view. She closed the door behind her and the latch clicked, and the room became 3 people and a decision. Vivian spoke first. She spoke the way she always spoke after an interview, with the resume open in front of her and her notes organized by question number and her assessment already structured before her mouth opened. "The candidate is competent," she said. "Communication skills are above average. Task examples were specific, measurable, relevant." She paused. However, the words sat between the sentences like a gate. There is a 14-month employment gap with no documented explanation. 3 residential changes in 4 years. 2 of the 3 stability indicators fall below the threshold we set for this role. She looked at her notes. I would classify her as qualified but not recommended. She said it without malice. She said it the way a machine produces an output. The inputs were entered. The formula was applied. The result was the result. Warren spoke second. He spoke more slowly. He said the candidate had been strong. He said her answers were well organized. He said he had no significant concerns, but also no significant reason to prioritize her above the other 2 finalists whose resumes did not carry the same risk profile. He was not opposed. He was not convinced. He was in the middle, which in a hiring committee functioned the same way the middle always functions, as permission for the loudest voice in the room to set the direction. Julian had not spoken. He was sitting with his hands flat on the glass table, the same way he had placed them when he entered the room. He had not opened the folio. He had not reviewed the resume. He had not made a single note. He sat for 11 seconds after Warren finished. Then he reached below the table. Not for a file, not for a document. He opened the shallow drawer built into the underside of the conference table on the executive side. He took out a small laminated card. He placed it on the glass between the folio and the water pitcher. The card was an employee badge. The lamination had peeled at 2 corners. The clip on the back was bent from years of being attached to the same shirt. The name on the badge read, Lorraine Whitfield, 1R, not 2. Vivian looked at the badge. Warren looked at the badge. Neither of them had seen it before. Julian did not explain it immediately. He looked at it for a moment the way you look at something you have looked at 1,000 times and have never once looked at long enough. Then he told them. He told them about a woman who cleaned offices from 10 at night until 6 in the morning for 23 years and stood behind a retail counter in the daylight once the cleaning alone stopped covering rent. He told them she was never interviewed for a single one of those jobs. She was dispatched assigned, placed, a name on a Sunday night call sheet. He told them nobody in any of those buildings ever learned that name, and the one time it was printed on a badge, they printed it wrong and she never corrected it because correcting it would have required someone to decide she was a person worth spelling right. He told them she raised a boy alone in a 1-bedroom apartment in Mattapan, that she cooked his dinner before her night shift and labeled it in the refrigerator with the day of the week, that she put him through Boston University on a scholarship and a Pell Grant and a work-study job, and co-signed a second mortgage on her own apartment so he could start a company without reading the terms because she trusted him the way she trusted mornings, and that she died on a Tuesday night on the 6th floor of a building on State Street between the last cubicle row and the closet where she kept her cart, and nobody on that floor knew who she was. He did not say the word mother. He did not need to. Step back for a moment and look at what this story has quietly been building. 2 women a generation apart cleaning rooms for people who would never trouble to learn their names. One left a list of 3 plain sentences so they would outlive her. The other let her own name stay misspelled on a badge for 23 years because fixing it would have asked someone to see her. Neither was ever interviewed. Both were only ever assigned. Simone never met Lorraine, Julian never met Corinne. And yet the whole collision in the elevator and now in this room is really those 2 silences, finding each other through the only 2 people they left behind. Then he told them what he had heard in the elevator. A woman rehearsing answers to an interview she had not yet been given describing time management and weakness and the word stability to no one at all and saying nothing there that was any different from what she had said in this room. He did not tell them what to decide. Vivian set down her pen. She did not soften. This was, after all, the system he had built, and she had learned it from him. She reminded him that the role was client-facing, that 2 other finalists carried none of the same risk, that the firm sold Fortune 500 companies a promise of objectivity and could not be caught overruling its own model the first time it produced an inconvenient name. She reminded him that his own report called the gap a stability indicator on page 51, and that if a badge in a drawer was now enough to override the methodology, then the methodology had never meant anything at all. She was not being cruel. She was being right in exactly the way Julian had spent 11 years teaching people to be right. Julian did not raise his voice. He said she was correct about all of it, and that this was the part he had never been willing to put in a report. He told them he had built a system that would have thrown his own mother out in the first round, and that he had let it run for 11 years, because that was easier than looking at what it cost. He was not asking them to lower the bar, he said. He was asking them to notice that the bar had been measuring the wrong thing. And then he did the one thing a man in his position almost never does. He said, "If this hire fails, it is mine. Put my name on it, not the model's. Mine." He was staking the one thing his career was actually built on, which was being right on a woman he had known for 40 minutes, and a glass of water she had never been offered. The room stayed quiet longer than a room usually does. Vivian looked at the badge for a long time. She looked at her notes. She looked at the 2 thin underlines beside the 14-month gap. She did not cross them out, but she did not circle them either. Warren picked up his pen and wrote one word on his pad. Julian waited, and for 11 seconds, he genuinely did not know which way it would go. The decision was unanimous, but it was not unanimous for the same reasons. Notice what actually turned that room. Not a speech, not a plea. A man laid a peeling laminated badge on a glass table and let a name that had been spelled wrong for 23 years finally be looked at. If you are ever the one holding the folder and the pen, remember that the truest thing about a person rarely fits in the boxes on the form. Now and then, the most useful thing you can do is set the checklist down long enough to see the person it was built to miss. Simone took the 44 bus home. She sat in the window seat on the left side because that was the side where the sun did not come through the glass in the afternoon and she could close her eyes without the light making it impossible. She did not close her eyes. She watched the city move past her the way it always moved, indifferent. The same buildings, the same intersections, the same people standing at the same corners, waiting for the same signal to change. She got off at the stop 2 blocks from the apartment and walked the rest because walking gave her time to rearrange her face before she opened the door. Elijah was sitting on the floor with Amara when she came in. He had built a city out of cereal boxes and tape. Amara was sitting inside it. He looked up. "How did it go?" She put her bag on the counter. She took off the blazer and folded it carefully because it was not hers, and because careful was the only way she knew how to handle things that had been lent to her. "I do not know," she said. He looked at her for a moment, the way a 7-year-old looks at a parent when he is trying to decide whether the answer is true or whether it is the kind of truth adults use when the real truth is too heavy to carry through a door. He went back to building. She made dinner pasta with butter and frozen peas. Elijah ate his. Amara ate half and wore the other half. She gave them baths. She read to Amara from a picture book about a bear who could not find his hat. She sat on the edge of Elijah's bed and he asked her again, "Do you think you got it?" "I do not know," she said again. It was the truth both times. She did not call anyone to tell them how it went. There was no one to call. The neighbor who lent the blazer was asleep. Renee, who lent the shoes, was working a night shift. Her mother was gone. After the children were asleep, she sat at the kitchen table. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that only happens when 2 children are sleeping, and the adult who takes care of them has nothing left to do except sit with whatever the day left behind. She opened the notebook. She turned to the next blank page. She wrote the date. She wrote the company name. She wrote the position. She wrote each question she could remember and the answer she had given. She marked the ones that worked with a check. She marked the ones that did not with a dash. She revised the ones with dashes. She did this the way she had done it 47 times before, without ceremony, without hope, and without hopelessness. With the steady hand of someone who understood that preparation was not optimism, it was labor. And labor was the one thing she had never been afraid of. She reached the last page of interview notes. Then she turned past it, past the data, past the checks and dashes to the back of the notebook, where the pages were different, where the handwriting was not hers. She looked at the 3 lines her mother had written in ballpoint pen that pressed hard enough to leave grooves on the page behind it. Things they cannot take from you. Your name, how hard you work when nobody is watching how you walk into a room. She read the 3rd line. She thought about the moment Julian walked through the door, and she recognized his eyes and understood that the man who had heard everything she said in the elevator was the man who would decide whether any of it mattered. She had not looked away. She had not apologized. She had not explained or qualified or softened. She had stayed in the chair in the borrowed blazer with the re-hemmed cuffs, and she had answered his question about stability with the truth. Not because she was brave, because she had run out of other options, and the truth was the only thing she had left that still fit. She closed the notebook. She placed it on the table. She sat in the quiet kitchen of an apartment she might not be living in next month, and she held her hands flat on the surface the way her mother used to hold her hands on the hotel room desk during her break palms down. Still the way you hold yourself when you are not sure what comes next, but you have decided you are not going to fall apart while you wait for it. The call came on a Wednesday, 3 days after the interview. Simone was at the kitchen counter packing Elijah's lunch when her phone rang. She did not recognize the number. She answered the way she answered every unknown number, with the voice she used for landlords and bill collectors and automated systems, the voice that expected nothing. "This is Julian Whitfield." She stopped moving. The peanut butter knife was in right hand. She set it down on the counter. She did not sit. She stood. "I want to be honest with you about something before I say anything else," he said. She waited. She had been waiting for phone calls like this for 3 years. She knew the architecture. The pause before the polite rejection, the compliment that preceded the decline, the phrase, "We were very impressed," followed by the word, "however." She knew all of it. She had 47 versions of it stored in the notebook on her kitchen table. "I was in the elevator," he said. "I know," she said. "I heard everything you said." "I know," she said again. He was quiet for a moment. The line held. Neither of them filled it. Then he spoke. "The hiring committee made a unanimous decision. We would like to offer you the position." She did not respond immediately. Not because she did not hear him, because the sentence did not match any of the 47 patterns she had memorized. It did not begin with "unfortunately." It did not contain the word "however." It did not end with a referral to another opening or a suggestion to reapply in 6 months. It was a sentence she had never practiced a response to. "But I need you to understand something," he continued. "I did not hire you because of what I heard in the elevator. I did not hire you because I felt sorry for you. I hired you because you were the best person in the room. The elevator did not change that. It confirmed it." She stood at the kitchen counter with the phone against her ear and the peanut butter knife on the counter and the cereal boxes from Elijah's City still stacked against the wall. She did not cry. She did not thank him 3 times or ask him to repeat it or say she would not let him down. She said one word. When he told her, she wrote the start date on the back of a grocery receipt with the pen she kept next to the phone. Monday, 8:30, 38th floor. She hung up. She stood in the kitchen for a full minute without moving. Then she picked up the knife. She finished making the sandwich. She cut it diagonally because that was how Elijah liked it, and because some things do not change just because everything else is about to. The elation lasted until roughly 4 in the morning. That was when the other arithmetic woke her, the arithmetic that had never once let her celebrate anything all the way through. A real job on the 38th floor meant real hours, and real hours meant full-day childcare for 2 children, and full-day childcare cost more than the patchwork of favors and half-days she had been surviving on. The first paycheck was 2, maybe 3 weeks out. The childcare center wanted a deposit and the first week up front before Monday. She counted what she had. She counted it twice, the way you count when the number does not change, but you keep hoping the counting will. It was not enough. It was not close. For the first time in 3 years, she had won the room, and she still might not be able to walk into it. Her whole life had trained her for exactly one response to a moment like this, and it was silence. You do not explain. You do not ask. You do not hand a person a reason to see you as a problem instead of a hire. She had watched the words "my daughter" turn 47 interviews into sympathy exercises, and she had promised herself she would never again let need do the talking for her. So her first instinct at that kitchen table at 4 in the morning was to say nothing. Take the job and quietly let it fall apart under her, rather than admit out loud that the distance between her and the thing she had earned was a number with 2 digits in it. She almost did. Then she looked at the 3 lines in the back of the notebook, and she thought about the chair on the 38th floor and the truth she had finally said out loud in it, and how the only thing that had ever changed her life was the one time she stopped hiding the reason. So on Thursday morning, she did the hardest thing she knew how to do, which was not to work harder or wait longer. It was to pick up the phone before she could talk herself out of it and tell the truth again. Not a plea. A fact stated the way she stated her name. She said she wanted the job, she was going to be excellent at it, and there was a 2-week gap between now and her first paycheck that she could not bridge alone, and she was saying so plainly because she had learned the hard way what silence costs. There was a pause on the line. Then Vivian Calloway, of all people, answered in the same flat, procedural voice she used for everything. She said the firm had a new provision for first-month child care and relocation support effective that quarter, available to any employee who needed it, and that Simone should submit the form like anyone else. She did not say it warmly. She did not need to. What she was really telling Simone in the only language she spoke was that this was not a favor and it was not charity. It was policy now. It was a box on a form, and a box on a form is the one thing in that whole world that treats everyone exactly the same. Simone did not know yet that the provision was 3 weeks old, that it had a single author, and that the memo creating it was dated the Monday after an interview on the 38th floor. Simone arrived at 8:12 on her first Monday, not because 8:30 was not early enough, because 8:17 was when the bus dropped her off, and waiting 18 minutes in the lobby felt like wasting time she had spent 3 years learning not to waste. She found her desk. She placed her bag beneath it. She placed the notebook inside the bag. She did not take it out. She did not need to anymore. The desk was real. The chair was real. The nameplate had her name on it spelled correctly. She started working before anyone showed her the system. She figured out the filing structure by reading the folder labels. She figured out the phone extension by calling herself from the lobby phone during her first break. She figured out the coffee machine by watching the person who used it before her and doing what they did the way she had figured out everything else in her life, by paying attention when no one expected her to. She arrived early every day that week, not to impress anyone, because early was who she was. It had always been who she was. Her mother had been late in 31 years. Simone had never been late in her life. These were not habits, they were inheritances. After the second month, something changed at home. It was small, so small that someone who did not live inside the math of Simone's daily life would not have noticed it. Elijah stopped asking. He did not ask on a Sunday night whether they would be living in the same place the following week. He did not ask on a Monday morning whether the bus route would change. He did not ask. The question that had appeared in the story 3 times simply stopped appearing, and its absence was louder than it had ever been. Amara brought home a drawing from daycare. Crayon on construction paper. A tall building. 42 floors. though the floors were uneven and the windows were different sizes, and the door at the bottom was bigger than any real door. At the top of the page, in the teacher's handwriting, because Amara could not yet write her own words, it said, "Mommy's Building." Simone put it on the refrigerator. She looked at it every morning while she made lunches. It was the first drawing Amara had ever made of a place that still existed when she came home. One afternoon, in the 3rd month, Julian walked into the break room on the 38th floor to refill his water. Simone was not there, but her notebook was. It was sitting on the table beside a half-finished cup of coffee open. Not to a page of interview data, not to a page of checks and dashes. It was open to the back to the pages with handwriting that was not Simone's. He did not mean to read it. He looked down, and the words were there. 3 lines in ballpoint pen that had pressed hard enough to leave grooves on the page behind it. Things they cannot take from you. Your name. How hard you work when nobody is watching. How you walk into a room. Julian sat down. He did not pick up the notebook. He did not touch it. He sat in the break room chair and looked at 3 sentences written by a woman who cleaned hotel rooms for 31 years and never once called in sick and died at 53 on the 6th floor of a building where nobody knew her name. He thought about the badge in his desk drawer. Lorraine, 1R. He thought about how many people walk into rooms every day carrying things in their bags that no one ever asks to see. Letters lists, photographs, prayers written on the backs of receipts. The quiet cargo of people who have been told their whole lives that what they carry does not matter. He closed the notebook. He put it back exactly where she had left it. Some things do not need to be spoken to be understood. A few things changed in that building over the following year, and none of them were announced. The night cleaning contract was not renewed with Apex. The crew was brought on as direct hires with their names on the payroll and their badges printed from a list. Julian checked himself, letter by letter. The recommendation on page 47, the one no client had ever implemented and Julian had never once required, became a standard clause in every engagement the firm signed. He did not give a speech about it. He simply stopped publishing a report that said one thing while running a company that did another. And a little over a year after she first rehearsed answers to no one in a slow elevator, Simone Ellison sat on the other side of the glass table on the 38th floor, a folder in front of her and an uncapped pen in her hand, interviewing candidates for a role on her own team. Halfway down the stack was a resume with a 14-month gap and 3 addresses in 4 years, flagged by the model sorted quietly toward the bottom of the pile. She looked at the gap for a moment, the way you look at something you recognize. Then she moved it to the top. She picked up the phone, and she gave that person the one thing the first 47 rooms had never given her. She asked to hear the story before she decided what it meant. She walked into that elevator practicing for a job interview. She did not know she was already being interviewed. The truth is, most of us are. Every room we walk into, every bus we ride, every conversation we have when we think nobody is listening. Someone is always listening. The question is not whether you are being watched. The question is whether who you are when no one is looking is the same person you become when everyone is. There are people right now rehearsing answers on public buses, practicing handshakes in bathroom mirrors, ironing borrowed clothes on kitchen counters at 5 o'clock in the morning. They are not desperate. They are preparing. There is a difference, and it is a difference that most of the people sitting on the other side of the interview table have never had to learn. There is someone in your life right now practicing for something they have not been given yet. Rehearsing answers to questions nobody has asked them. Showing up early to places that have not yet decided whether to let them stay. You might be that person. And if you are, keep rehearsing. Keep ironing the borrowed blazer. Keep writing in the notebook. Keep walking into rooms the way your mother taught you. The right room will hear you. If this story reminded you that preparation is not desperation, send it to someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe now. See you in the next one. This is a fictional story, but the statistics in it are not. Single mothers in the United States face callback rates 35% lower than comparable candidates without children. Resume gaps are penalized by hiring systems regardless of the reason for the gap, whether it was illness, caregiving, or economic displacement. The phrase cultural fit, used in the majority of post-interview evaluations, has been shown to correlate with the systematic exclusion of candidates whose life circumstances do not follow a linear professional timeline. These are documented findings. They appear in workforce research published every year. They are known. They are measured. They are rarely acted upon. I wrote this story because I have watched people practice for interviews on public buses. I have seen resumes with gaps that contained more courage than most careers. And I have sat in rooms where the best candidate was not the one who performed the best, but the one whose performance and person were the same thing. That distinction matters. It should matter to more people than it currently does. If it made you think good. Thinking is the first thing that has to happen before anything changes. And maybe that is the quiet thing to carry home. Everyone you pass today is holding something in a bag they will never be asked to open. A list. A gap. A reason. You will not always get to read it, but you can choose to move through the world as though it is there because it always is. The kindest thing Julian ever did was not the offer. It was closing that notebook and setting it back exactly where he found it. Sometimes respect looks like that. Seeing something and letting a person keep it as their own. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.